time for our weekly sci-fi segment. Welcome to the Sci-Fi Show on GameSHOUT.
Welcome back to GameSHOUT Radio. We're going to blow your minds with science this week. Here are your hosts, Soul Rift and Jadri.
No, thank you, Trick. You know what? I hope the blowing your mind is a metaphorical thing and does not refer to Jadri's, latest science experiment. Explosives. Yeah.
I like exploding things. I can't help it.
Either that or Josh's burritos. Whoa.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's exploding things too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That oh my goodness. I got to clear my mind. Let's just jump into some scientific inventions. How about this? Here? When you got flatulence on one side, you got to stop it. Maybe on the other side, you've got a problem with snoring. And for some people, snoring is just no joke. So the Institute for Biomedical Engineering at the University of Southern California has been developing a serious solution. Now, snoring is caused when the soft tissue in the airways, the palate, or the uvula, relaxes during sleep and vibrates. Now, surgically remodeling the tissue can stop the noise, but this may be too extreme for some sufferers. Now, the university's idea, you can go, there's one thing like taking out your tonsils, or you can, butcher someone's throat to stop them from snoring, but the university's idea...
My hunting buddy has got a serious case of snore so bad that it literally wakes and keeps the whole house awake. Man, when he gets in there, it's just awful. Oh, in that hunting cabin, rattles the tin roof.
That must scare away all the deer for miles around.
Oh, of course.
Well, maybe you need to get him one of these. The university's idea is to make the muscles near the tissue contract when snoring starts. This will tighten the tissue and stop the vibration. Now, to do this, small coils of wires must be injected into the muscle and a separate coil placed under the patient's pillow. The pillow coil then wirelessly induces pulsed power. Now, this means that it generates a magnetic field which can send an electrical current, kind of like a wireless internet connection. And it sends this pulse a few times per second with a very, very low charge. You're not trying to shock the guy into a panic, but the coils will cause the muscles to contract and then make the tissue tighten. Now, the system uses a microphone to listen to the snores and then to start before switching on the juice for this device. Now, the strength and the duration of the pulses, they need to silence the individual's snores and without waking them up, so it's still found by trial and error. So if you do want to try this out, you've got to go into the hospital, get these things injected, and then go through a series of trials and tune up your own personal anti-snoring device.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine him wearing some snoring device, but what I end up doing is the special earplugs that I've got for shooting at the indoor range, I wear those. Gets me enough sleep.
There you go.
I'm thinking you could just stuff those up his nose.
That was the next thought. The only problem is that when they're breathing through their nose, they don't snore as loudly as when they're breathing through their mouth.
It's the mouth that causes the worst snoring, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I could shut his mouth, tape it closed, well then, there's a different story. The problem is that could cause some other issues.
Usually, one option is to roll someone over onto their side. Usually if someone's lying on their back, that can cause snoring to increase because the uvula will then dangle down into the airways and vibrate even more.
Yeah, especially when they're larger out front, like pregnant women end up sleeping on their back a lot. That oftentimes they'll find that they snore, when they're preggers, or when my buddy happens to be, a little rotund. If he hears this broadcast, I'm screwed, because we're out in the woods with bows, arrows, and guns. This could be trouble.
Oh my goodness! Well, he's going to mistake you for a deer and stick an arrow in your butt.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Well, you know what? It's not just good news on the invention front. Scientists are warning of upcoming cosmic storms. That's right. The next 11 years are predicted to bring even stronger storms than we've been experiencing in quite a long period of time. Now, these sun-spawned cosmic storms are generally resulted by they come through the various solar cycles, producing sunspots, releasing large amounts of radioactive energy out into different parts of space. And they can play havoc on Earth with power grids, orbiting satellites. And these solar storms that are predicted in the next 11 years could be about 50% stronger than the last cycle of solar storms that we've just recently experienced. Yeah.
Wow, that's going to make my Nextel really squeak and squawk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it really makes you wonder about going into space travel with all these extra solar storms. But Japan, they're not stopping their space tourism program just because some solar wind could kill all their passengers. That's right. A Japanese entrepreneur has been approved as the next candidate for a space tourism flight to the International Space Station, according to the U.S. firm Space Adventures. Now, Daisuke Enomoto, 34, who has made his fortune in information technology, will become the fourth ultra-wealthy tourist to pay for a ride to the International Space Station, and the first one from Japan. After being judged medically fit and signing a final contract, Enomoto will undergo cosmonaut training with the Russian Federation Space Agency, the company said in a statement. Now, the entrepreneur's flight will start on a Soyuz TMA-9 en route to the ISS, and it's scheduled to take off in September 2006. So, space tourism just might be the way to reinvigorate our dying space flight industry. There's a lot of government funding cutting out NASA. The Russian Federation can barely keep their stuff going. China's getting their program started, getting it off the ground in more ways than one. But there's a lot more money in private investors than there seems to be available from the governments. And if they can tap into that and say, well, just by taking one rich guy to the space station, that means we can get 3 valuable astronauts and a whole lot of experiments up there too. Well, maybe it's not just a bad thing to be taking on passengers with each trip they go up. And yes, Canada does. Be fun. Canada doesn't have its own direct space program, but they do provide parts primarily for the United States programs, such as the Canadarm, the big arm on the space shuttle that allows them to manipulate objects in space and rebuild things like the Hubble Space Telescope. And Canada is involved in a lot of other projects that are involved in, producing chemicals. They've produced the oils and lubricants that allow a lot of the space devices to operate in outer space at 0 temperatures and not freeze. So a lot of other countries are also...
And they're all named, they end with the word eh.
Yeah. A lot of countries around the world. A lot of countries around the world don't have their own space programs per se. They just develop different components that are used. It is sort of an international effort, and that is really was the purpose of the International Space Station, that each country would produce a part of it. And the goal was to have, of course, the United States, which had their space shuttle program that could deliver the parts into orbital space, assemble all the components of the orbital space station together. And, of course, that has just derailed since the destruction of the Challenger space shuttle. And it's really spiraled all of our space efforts down as we're fighting on one hand limited budgets, and on the other hand these safety concerns. We just don't want to send these shuttles up if it's going to be dangerous for the people working on them. Well, we've got to take a quick break here on the Science Weekly Show. When we come back, we've got a whole lot more science news right here on GameSHOUT Radio right after this.
You're listening to GameSHOUT Radio. Want to know what's so revolutionary about the Nintendo Revolution? Don't worry, GameSHOUT's all over that. Gamepad Gamer's Nintendo Revolution Edition mini podcast gives you all you ever wanted to know about the Nintendo Revolution and more. Do we have Revolution news? Of course we do, buddy. How about game reviews? Was there ever any doubt? Previews of those mysterious games? No problem, man. So be sure to find out about the games, news, previews, and reviews that matter from the only gaming site that really, really matters. You got it. GameSHOUT.com.
And welcome back to GameSHOUT Radio. This is the Science Weekly Show right here with your hosts, Soul Rift and Jadri. Excellent.
Yay!
Yes. Well, you know, we've just been talking about different space programs, so of course, let's throw in a little bit more space news. NASA's Mars-bound spacecraft is getting close to the end of its seven-month journey, but you know what? The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, or MRO, faces a few obstacles before it arrives at Mars. Now, it's on course to enter orbit on March 10th, so this Friday it should enter orbit. Now, if it's successful, it will spend the next 2 years photographing. There we go.
Yes, thank you.
I knew there was an extra syllable in there somewhere. Now, it's going to be photographing the surface and scouting for future landing sites for more rovers. Now, the spacecraft is performing so well that the engineers have canceled 2 final maneuvers to adjust its course in the last leg of the trip, said James Graff, project manager from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Now, the greatest challenge of this $720 million mission is yet to come. Within the last 15 years, NASA has lost 2 spacecraft during orbital insertion phase around Mars, and not to mention the European Space Agency lost their Beagle probe. Now, the engineers are hoping that this 2-ton reconnaissance orbiter, which has journeyed nearly 300 million miles, will not suffer the same fate. So cross your fingers, watch your NASA channel. This March 10th, we'll find out if this orbiter makes it in or not, and if they just dumped another $720 million down the drain. It's gotta suck when those things crash.
Big time.
Oh, I just remember the probe that went barreling down in the middle of the desert, burning up like a fireball, and they're like, oh, we just lost all of our research.
I hate that.
You know, but I know how these things go, how, you build these careful electronic devices and then just something just doesn't go right. But let's just hope it doesn't befall NASA again, especially when, they need the funding. They've got to have a few successes there to get some more money and get that International Space Station complete. In our final little bit of news, outside of space and down to the human body, that's right, human genes involved in metabolism, skin pigmentation, brain function, and reproduction have all evolved in response to recent environmental changes, according to a new study of natural selection in the human genome. Doubters of evolution, here's your proof. We're still evolving, right here, right now. It's the human being. Yes, researchers at the University of Chicago, United States, have developed statistical tests to find genomic regions that evolution has favored over the last 15,000 years or so, when modern humans dealt with the end of the last ice age and the beginning of agriculture, increased population densities. Now, many of the 700 genes that the researchers identified, especially those involved in smelling, fertility and reproduction, are also suspected of having undergone natural selections during the divergence of humans and chimpanzees millions of years ago. But some of the newly identified genes fall into the categories not previously known to be targets of selection in the human lineage, such as those involved in metabolism of carbohydrates and fatty acids. So it's very interesting to see that the human body is still evolving and that they are able to track these changes. Now, for example, gene variants that improve the digestion of lactose have become more common, presumably since the domestication of cattle provided a ready source of milk. And in some Europeans, genes giving a lighter skin have increased in frequency as populations have moved north to regions where there is less sunlight to generate vitamin D. Well, the human body is still going, and our show isn't. Stay tuned for more here on GameSHOUT Radio.
This is GameSHOUT Radio, the #1 talk game station in the world. Visit GameSHOUT.com for more info. GameSHOUT. GameSHOUT.